Fourscore and 59 years ago, 11 states decided they no longer wanted to be a part of the United States of America. The conflict that followed saw the deaths of 625,000 Americans, and the men who started the war did so because they feared that they would lose their power, they feared that they would lose their livelihood and have to give it up so that America could fulfill its promise of offering freedom to every single one of its citizens. And they did so because they didn't want to lose their slaves. Now, 159 years later, we still hear arguments about flags and monuments and memorabilia commemorating the men who betrayed their country and took up arms against their countrymen. Why do we celebrate them? And the answer is quite simple, actually. False history, a rewritten narrative. History is written by the victors, said Winston Churchill. That's not always the case, and the story of the South proves it. Southern textbooks nowadays portray slaves as happy people who were being forced to leave their owners when the North came and took them away. And the war was, of course, fought over states' rights. This idea was pushed by a group of daughters of Confederate soldiers, known as the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Clever name, I know. Their own website says that they are the descendants of soldiers, and they sponsored legislature and educational reform to try and change the narrative behind the Southern cause. They wanted to be seen, and they wanted their fathers to be seen as these righteous men fighting for their way of life. They sponsored a lot of the monuments we still hear arguments about nowadays in the South. They've rewritten their history. And this idea of the South as this oppressed group who only left because they had no other option, it's still something that's being taught today. And it's the reason we see such a divide in the thinking of states in the North and the West on what the Civil War was fought over and those in the Southeast United States. The Stars and Bars, which I'm sure a lot of you know, this guy. We all recognize it. It's the one we most often have a discussion about nowadays. One of the main arguments brought up against it is this idea of, it was never the Confederate flag, it was the battle flag, which isn't untrue. It was the battle flag of General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, which, when you think about which group did a lot of the fighting for the South, this is usually the group you're thinking of. Robert E. Lee was a pretty famous guy. Antietam Cemetery is built on his old plantation. He's the general for the South. And yes, that flag was never flown as an official ensign of the country of the Confederate States of America, but it became the symbol that they used and they rallied behind. According to Cornell University, Lee's army fought in over 12 campaigns against the North. They killed hundreds of thousands of Northern soldiers, of their countrymen, and they did it so that they could keep people in chains. According to Business Insider and other primary sources of the time, the creator of the second Confederate flag, the official flag, this one, and yes, the white's there on purpose, he did so because he felt that this represented the Confederacy and this should represent their cause. To quote him directly in what he published in his paper, he said, "As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heavenly ordained supremacy of the white man." We're fighting to maintain the heavenly ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race. A white flag would thus be emblematical of our cause. The Stars and Bars represented the country, and the rest of the flag represented their superiority over their slaves, their property, as they would refer to it. And the idea that we want to champion these men and hail them as heroes, and we're prideful because we're Southern and we did this thing or that thing, and this was the reason why, is disgusting, honestly. There are other countries or other groups of people who've done horrific things in their past. Germany, for example, is probably the most notorious nowadays. Obviously, not even 100 years ago, we fought World War II against the Nazis, who flew this symbol, one that strikes fear in people's hearts. And according to the German law archive, isn't even legal to be flown in the country nowadays. When people bring up the idea of the swastika to a German citizen, they're usually embarrassed or revolted at the idea, and they don't want to talk about it. But when we talk about the Confederacy in the United States today, we've got a third of the country that feels prideful and flies it off the back of their pickup truck next to the Stars and Stripes as though they belong together and didn't kill each other on the field of battle. Why are we proud of this? Why are we proud of racists and traitors and a cause that's steeped in the idea that we should be able to chain people up and let them work for us without pay? I'm obviously not saying that we should make the flag illegal. It's your right to fly what you want. But to fly it off a government building or to hang it in the city streets because it represents you is just, it's ridiculous. We shouldn't honor a flag that represents racism. We shouldn't honor a flag that represents traitors. And we most certainly shouldn't represent a flag that represents all of the men who died to end an institution that saw the deaths of so many. Thank you.